I used to think families only change slowly, over years with time and distance. But I was wrong. Sometimes everything can shift in just one moment, one sentence, one unexpected truth whispered into a room not ready to hold it. That's what happened to us. And I've never looked at my family the same way since. My name's Daniel, I'm 23, and until last summer, I thought I had a pretty typical family. You know the type: dad who mowed the lawn at 7 a.m. on Sundays, mom who saved every receipt just in case, and a younger brother, Ethan, who never stopped trying to be exactly like me, even when I really wished he wouldn't. We weren't overly emotional. We didn't hug a lot. We didn't say, "I love you" out loud, but it was there in packed lunches and car ride to soccer and awkward birthday dinners with too much cake and not enough conversation. Looking back, I realize now we were a house full of people who didn't really know each other. We just existed together. And then that one moment cracked it all open. It started 2 weeks after I moved back home. I'd finished college out of state, had nowhere else to go, and my parents, hesitant but polite, told me I could crash in my childhood bedroom until I figured it out. I didn't expect much, just some free meals and time to breathe, but something about being back in that house, back in those routines, felt stifling in a way I hadn't expected. And Ethan, he was 18 now, taller, quieter, still followed me around like a shadow, but now it felt different. He kept asking personal questions about college, about friends, about if I dated anyone. I dodged most of them. I hadn't come out to him yet, or anyone in my family. One night, around midnight, I heard a soft knock on my door. It creaked open, and there he was, hoodie half-zip hair mess, eyes tired but alert. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, sitting up in bed. He sat down on the floor, leaning back against the wall like he used to when he was a kid and couldn't sleep. For a few minutes, we just sat in silence. Then he said, "Do you ever feel like you can't be yourself around here?" My stomach tightened. Sometimes, I admitted. He didn't look at me. "Me too," he said softly. I didn't say anything for a while, because I could feel where this was going, and I wasn't sure he was ready for me to go there with him. Then he looked up, dead in the eyes, and said, "Dan, are you gay?" My heart stopped. I swallowed hard. "I am," I said quietly, and the room went still. For the first time, I wasn't the one holding the secret. He was, and I could see it all over his face. The weight of it, the fear, the need. He let out a shaky breath, then whispered, "Me too." And that was the moment, the one that transformed everything. Because for years, I'd been carrying the silence alone, and now I wasn't. We stayed up for hours, talking, whispering things we'd never said out loud before. He told me he'd known since he was 13, that he'd been too scared to say anything, that he thought maybe if he pretended hard enough, it would go away, but it hadn't. He told me about a boy in his art class, how they'd once shared earbuds on the bus, how it made him feel, and how he'd hated himself for it afterward. And I told him about my first boyfriend at college, how I'd cried in my dorm bathroom the first night we kissed, how terrified I'd been that someone would find out. It was like all the years we hadn't spoken honestly just came pouring out in one night. I didn't sleep at all, and for once, I didn't care. But the world outside that room hadn't changed. And when morning came, everything felt fragile again. "Are you going to tell them?" Ethan asked, voice low. I shrugged. "I want to, but I don't know how." He nodded. "Me either." We kept it between us for a few days. A quiet pact, a small rebellion. There was something about it that made us feel stronger, like we'd finally found our way to each other in a family full of half-finished conversations. But secrets don't like to stay hidden forever, and ours was already too big. It happened on a Tuesday. We were in the kitchen, just me, Ethan, and Mom. She was cleaning out the fridge, tossing out expired yogurts like it was a personal mission. I was leaning against the counter, scrolling through my phone, when she said, "Dan, you've been back almost 3 weeks. You seeing anyone?" I froze. Ethan looked up sharply. I hadn't prepared for this. I hadn't even thought about what I'd say when the moment came. But for some reason, maybe because Ethan was there, maybe because I was just tired of hiding, I said, "Not right now." But I did date someone in college. She turned around, holding a half-empty bottle of ranch. "Oh, what was her name?" I took a deep breath and said, "His name was Alex." She blinked. The silence after that was the kind that wraps around you like a wet blanket. Thick, heavy, suffocating. She looked at me, then at Ethan, and he, sweet, brave Ethan, stepped forward and said, "Me too." Just like that. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She just nodded, slowly, like she'd heard us say something in another language she didn't understand. Then she turned back to the fridge and kept throwing things out. We didn't speak for the rest of the day. That night, Ethan came into my room again. But this time, he didn't sit on the floor. He sat on the bed, beside me. "What if she hates us now?" he whispered. "She doesn't," I said. "She's just processing." "But what if Dad?" "We'll deal with that when we get there." And we would, together. Because no matter what came next, no matter how long it took our family to catch up, we weren't hiding anymore. We had each other. And that single moment had already changed everything. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment below, especially if there's a topic you want to see explored in a future video. You can even leave a post in our community tab, and we'll turn it into a full story just for you. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I was rested. I wasn't. I'd barely slept. It was the kind of night where you keep replaying one moment over and over in your head. My mom, standing in front of the fridge, holding that half-empty bottle of ranch like it was a grenade, and we had just pulled the pin. Ethan was still asleep across the hall. I could hear his soft snoring, the same rhythm I used to make fun of when we were kids. But that morning it felt comforting, because after what we did the night before, after we said what we said, we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. We told the truth, and now the waiting had begun. I found Mom in the kitchen again. She was stirring oatmeal, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept much either. I hesitated at the doorway. For the first time in years, I didn't know how to talk to her, but she spoke first. "You boys want coffee?" Yeah, sure," I said, stepping in. She grabbed a second mug, then said, without turning, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now." "But I should," she said, finally looking at me. "I'm your mother. I should have known." Her voice cracked a little, and for a split second, I saw something behind her eyes I hadn't seen since I was little. Vulnerability. "I didn't tell you because I didn't think you'd understand," I said gently. She placed the mugs on the table. "Sat down. I'm trying. I need a minute." I nodded. Then Ethan came shuffling in, hoodie pulled up, eyes still half closed. He paused when he saw us sitting there. "Is it safe?" he asked, like we were walking into a minefield. Mom let out the smallest laugh. "Come sit down." He sat beside me. And just like that, we had our first conversation about it. It wasn't long. It wasn't deep. But she asked questions, awkward ones, clumsy ones. And we answered. We told her it wasn't her fault, that this wasn't something new or sudden, that it had been with us for years, buried under sports and science fairs and polite dinners. She didn't cry, but she did squeeze our hands before she got up and said, "Okay, I guess I'm the one learning now." And that was more than I'd hoped for. But we still had one more person to tell. Dad. He worked long hours, often didn't get home until after 8. He was the kind of man who rarely smiled in pictures, the kind who had routines that never changed. I'd seen him mad before, disappointed, even scary, but I'd never seen him uncertain. I didn't know how he'd react, and that terrified me. We waited 2 days. 2 days of stomach knots and half-eaten dinners. 2 days of Ethan pacing the hallway like a trapped cat. On the third day, it happened almost by accident. It was after dinner. Ethan had gone upstairs. I was helping Mom with dishes. Dad was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, not really watching anything. I dried my hands, heart pounding, and then I said, "I'm going to tell him." Mom paused, holding a dripping plate. "Are you sure?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm doing it." He didn't even look up when I walked in. "Sit," he said, patting the cushion beside him. I sat, waited. He kept flipping. I cleared my throat. "Dad. There's something I need to say." He finally turned to look at me. Eyes unreadable. I took a deep breath. "I'm gay." He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stared. Seconds passed. Felt like minutes. Finally, he said, "Okay." That was it. Just okay. I stared at him, confused. "That's it. What else do you want me to say?" "I don't know. I guess I thought you'd be mad." He shrugged. "It's your life." And Ethan's. That made him pause. "What?" "He's gay too. We told Mom together." Dad leaned back, let out a slow breath, stared at the ceiling like he was doing mental math, then said, "Well, that explains a lot." I wasn't sure what he meant, but I didn't ask, because then he said something I'll never forget. "I don't care who you love. I care that you're good men, that you treat people right, that you look out for each other. That's what matters to me." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until then. Didn't realize how afraid I was of not being enough for him. But in that moment, I saw something behind his stoic face. Not softness exactly, but pride. And maybe even relief. Ethan came downstairs later, expecting the worst. I told him everything. He didn't believe me at first. "He didn't yell?" he asked. "Nope." "He didn't throw anything?" "Dude, no. He said we're good men. That's what matters." Ethan sat down, looked like he was about to cry. And then he laughed. "This family's weird, man." "Yeah," I agreed, but maybe weird's not so bad. Things didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still awkward silences, still questions that landed wrong, still moments where the air felt too thick to breathe. But now there was honesty, and that made all the difference. We started having dinners where no one looked at their phones. Mom asked about the people we dated. Dad made awkward jokes that sometimes missed but always tried. Ethan stopped wearing hoodies in 90-degree heat, and I started sleeping better. One afternoon, about a week later, I caught Dad in the garage, cleaning out old boxes. He handed me one. "Take a look," he said. Inside were photos, me and Ethan at Little League games, birthday parties, beach trips. All moments frozen in time. But what got me was a note tucked in the back. A yellowing scrap of paper with my name in his handwriting. I opened it. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I may not understand it all, but I'll try." It wasn't dated, but it looked old. "Did you write this recently?" I asked. He shook his head. "I wrote it the day you left for college, just in case." I stared at him, unable to speak. He just nodded and went back to sorting tools. And somehow that was the most Dad way to say, "I love you" I'd ever seen. We still have a long way to go. We're still learning how to talk, how to listen, how to show up. But that single moment, Ethan asking me that quiet question in my room, me saying yes, both of us whispering a truth we carried alone, it changed everything. Not because it fixed us, but because it made us real. If the first moment was the hardest, that quiet confession between two brothers, and the second was the riskiest, telling our parents, then what came next was something I hadn't fully braced for. The ripple effect. Because once the truth is out in a family, it doesn't stay neatly folded inside four walls. It leaks. It echoes. It spreads. Sometimes in whispers. Sometimes in silence. And sometimes through Facebook. It started with my mom. She didn't say much after that kitchen conversation. But a few days later, I noticed her pacing with her phone in the backyard. Long conversations. Furrowed brows. Pauses where she looked like she might cry or yell. I didn't ask. I figured if she was going to tell someone, she'd tell them. I just didn't expect it to be everyone. On a quiet Saturday morning, Ethan came into my room holding his phone like it was radioactive. "You've seen this, right?" He handed it to me, and there it was, my mom's Facebook post. "To all the friends and family in our lives. Both of my sons are gay. If this changes the way you see us, please feel free to unfriend. But if you stay, stay with love. We are proud of them and will protect them with everything we have. I blinked. Read it again. Then again. I didn't know what to feel. Pride? Panic? Gratitude? Total secondhand anxiety? Holy SH*T, I said. Ethan laughed, half nervously. She went full mom artillery. The reaction started rolling in almost immediately. Some comments were beautiful, loving, supportive. We love your family no matter what. Thank you for being brave and open. Your sons are lucky to have you. But others, not so much. There were a few quiet unfriendings. A couple of vague comments dripping in passive judgment. One family member, our aunt on Dad's side, even sent Mom a private message that said, "I'll pray for your boys. It's not too late to save them." She didn't respond. She just blocked her and made banana bread like nothing happened, which for Mom is basically a declaration of war. Dad, on the other hand, didn't say much about the post. He never had Facebook anyway. But that night, he called his brother Uncle Joe and told him the truth. No explanation. No apologies. Just facts. He told me the guy didn't say anything for 10 full seconds. I told Ethan later. What happened after? He said, "So when are they coming to visit again?" That was it. We both laughed. Then Ethan got quiet. "I didn't think it would feel this good," he said. What? To not be a secret. But it wasn't all smooth. A few days later, we went to dinner at Grandma's. It was supposed to be just a family meal, but we could feel in the air the second we walked in. She knew. She'd seen the post. She didn't say anything for the first hour, just asked about work, college, weather, like she was reading from a script. And then, after dessert, she cleared her throat and said, "I suppose you boys think you're very brave." We froze. Mom's eyes flicked toward Ethan, who looked like he might throw up, but then Grandma added, "Well, you are, and I hope you know you still got a place at my table." That moment, that was the one Ethan cried in the car about. He didn't even try to hide it. He just leaned against the window, tears streaming silently, and whispered, "I thought she'd hate me. She doesn't. I know. That's why I'm crying." Over the next few weeks, things shifted, subtle things. The way neighbors waved a little longer. The way the mailman left a rainbow sticker on our mailbox one day. The way Dad asked, casually over breakfast, if that guy from your college was still someone I talked to. I told him no, but the fact that he asked, it mattered. Ethan started dressing differently. Nothing huge, just more color, less hiding. He stopped flinching every time someone brought up prom. Even said he might go if he could find the right date. Mom tried to set him up with someone from her book club son. He declined, but it was hilarious. And I started writing again. Not journaling. Real writing. Stories about brothers. About quiet courage. About the kind of love that doesn't always arrive with fireworks, but shows up again and again in the smallest moments. One of those stories I submitted to a local essay contest. Didn't win, but it got published online. And that's how my cousin Sarah found it. She texted me at 2 a.m. Just read your piece. Cried my eyes out. I'm by 2. Haven't told anyone yet, but I'm working up to it. Thank you for giving me hope. I stared at that message for a long time, then sent her back just 3 words. You're not alone. It's wild how a single moment can expand beyond what you ever imagined. How 2 people whispering the truth in a dark room can echo into dozens of lives, shaking loose other secrets, other freedoms, other chances for honesty. And even though not everyone celebrated with us, even though some friendships faded quietly, even though we had awkward dinners, intense silences, and moments of doubt, we were free. For the first time in our family, we were fully seen. One night, Ethan came into my room again, like always, but this time he didn't sit on the floor. He just lay back on the bed beside me, both of us staring at the ceiling like kids again. He said, "Do you ever wish we'd said something sooner?" I thought for a second. Sometimes. But maybe we weren't ready before. Maybe they weren't either. We were quiet after that. Then I said, "You realize we started something, right?" He smiled. Yeah, I just hope it keeps going. You'd think that after coming out, after telling our parents, after making it public, the hardest part would be over. But what no one talks about is this. Once the secret is out, real life begins. And real life is awkward, unpredictable, and sometimes kind of hilarious. Take dinner, for example. Our house used to be dead quiet during meals. Forks clinking, TV murmuring in the background, occasional small talk about weather or gas prices. Now, it was like someone had hit the unmute button. Mom suddenly wanted to know everything. Who we dated, what it was like. If we thought she would have been cool in high school, she wouldn't have, respectfully. One night, she asked Ethan mid-bite of spaghetti, "So if you were to marry someone, would it be a big wedding or small?" He nearly choked. I don't know. Probably small. Dad, without looking up from his plate, said, "It better be cheaper than your mother's." Mom laughed, which made Ethan laugh, which made me realize something. We were becoming a different kind of family, one that talked, but not everything was easy. Some things felt off, like how Dad never quite made eye contact when he said, "boyfriend," or how Ethan would change the subject every time I asked if there was someone he liked at school. We were open, but still a little guarded, like we'd open the door, but kept a foot brace behind it. Then one Saturday, the door blew wide open. Literally. It was just afternoon. Ethan and I were home alone. I was in the living room, editing a short story, and he was in the kitchen making toast. We were in that lazy, weekend kind of silence. And then the front door opened. We both looked up. It was Zane. Now, if you're wondering, who the hell is Zane? Same. So were we. Tall, messy hair, leather jacket, loud boots, looked like the lead singer of an indie band, and smelled like vanilla and danger. He walked in like he owned the place. Ethan's toast flew out of his hand. "What are you doing here?" he blurted, half panicked, half thrilled. I stood up, completely confused. "Who is?" Zane grinned. Surprise? Turns out, Zane was Ethan's not-so-secret crush. And apparently more than that. I invited him. Ethan said quickly, eyes wide, voice trembling. I blinked. Invited him? When? This morning. You were asleep. He was in the city. I didn't think he'd actually come. Zane shrugged. I had nothing better to do. He winked at Ethan. Ethan turned bright red. For the next 2 hours, Zane stayed. Sat on our couch. Ate our snacks. Talked about music in school and how he once got kicked out of French class for calling the teacher man. I kept looking at Ethan. I'd never seen him like that before. Not nervous, not exactly, but alive. Leaning in, laughing too hard. Fiddling with the hem of his shirt, like it was the only thing keeping him from floating away. Then Dad came home. And that was tense. He walked in, toolbox in hand, sweaty from the garage. He paused a second he saw Zane. Zane, for the record, did not pause. He stood up, stuck out his hand, and said, "Hi, sir. I'm Zane." Dad looked at the hand, like it might bite him, then shook it, slowly, and said, "Friend of Ethan's?" Zane looked at Ethan, then back at Dad, then said something like that. I held my breath. Ethan's knuckles went white. Dad gave the smallest of nods, then turned to me. "You want to help me with the shelves?" That was Dad code for, "Get in here so I don't accidentally say something I'll regret." I followed him into the garage. He closed the door behind us, then said, "Is this a thing?" "I think it might be." He scratched his chin. "Okay." That was it. Just okay. But I could tell it took effort. Later, after Zane left, Ethan came into my room and collapsed on the bed. "Was it bad?" "No," I said. "You sure?" He was civil. For Dad, that's practically hugging someone. Ethan exhaled. "I'm going to marry him." I laughed. "Please wait until you finish high school." Over the next week, Zane came over 2 more times. Mom was instantly obsessed. "You're Zane, huh?" she'd say, pretending like he hadn't already visited. She asked about his grades, his parents, his plans for the future. Ethan practically melted into the floor every time. But Zane handled it like a pro. Dad, meanwhile, stayed polite, distant but not cold. One night, as we cleared dishes, he said to me, "I don't get it, but he seems like a good kid." That was the closest he'd come to approval. Then came the barbecue. Every summer, we host one. It's sort of tradition. Neighbors, cousins, family, friends. They all come by, eat too much, and pretend we see each other more than once a year. This time, Mom made it clear Zane's invited. No arguments. Dad didn't argue, but he did spend an hour cleaning the grill like it had personally offended him. The day of, the backyard was full of folding chairs, chatter, and the smell of burgers. Ethan was buzzing around like he was on caffeine and adrenaline. Zane showed up in jeans, a clean tee, and the same damn boots. He brought pie. I don't know who taught him to be so charming, but it worked. Everyone liked him. Even Aunt Lisa, who once called oat milk woke poison, asked if he had siblings. But then something happened. Something small, but seismic. I was standing near the lemonade table when I saw it. Zane and Ethan, not doing anything dramatic, just standing close. Zane brushed something off Ethan's cheek, a crumb or an eyelash, or who knows what, and Ethan smiled. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't loud. It was a kind of smile that says, "I'm safe, I'm seen." And Dad saw it. I watched his eyes track the moment, and I held my breath. But instead of stiffening, he looked down, then up, then gave the smallest, and I mean barely there, nod, like he was letting it be. That night, after everyone had gone, the backyard was quiet. Just me, Ethan, and the smell of extinguished coals. He sat beside me on the deck. "I think Dad's trying," he said. "He is." I agreed. "It's weird. It's real." He looked at me, grinned. "I like real." We sat in silence for a while, staring at the stars. Then he said, "I used to think I'd have to hide forever." I did too. But now, he looked at me, eyes soft. "We're not hiding anymore. If you had asked me when I was younger who the stronger brother was, I would have said me, without hesitation. I was older. I spoke first in conversations. I stood between Ethan and the world when kids tease him for being too quiet, too sensitive, too soft. I was the protector, the shield. But something shifted after Zane, after the barbecue, after that delicate, silent moment when Dad chose not to flinch, when he let Ethan be seen. For the first time, I saw Ethan as something else. Not someone I had to protect, but someone who could protect me. And I didn't realize how much I'd need that until everything in my life started unraveling. It began with a phone call. I'd been freelancing for a local digital magazine. It didn't pay much, but it gave me structure and let me write about the things I cared about. Then on a Monday morning, I got the email. "Unfortunately, due to budget cuts, we will not be continuing your contract after this month." I stared at the screen for a solid 5 minutes. Not angry, not even shocked. Just hollow, because for the first time in months, I had felt like I was building something. Like I was someone, and now it was slipping away. I didn't tell anyone that day. Not Mom, not Ethan. I just walked around in a daze, nodding when people spoke, faking smiles, pretending the world hadn't just tilted beneath me. But Ethan saw through it immediately. He didn't ask anything that night. He just knocked on my door at 10 p.m. with a slice of leftover pie and said, "Want to watch something dumb?" We sat in silence and watched a YouTube video of goats fainting for 20 minutes. I laughed once. A real laugh. He grinned like it was a win. The next morning, I cracked. I was pouring cereal, hands shaking, and Mom asked, "You okay?" And before I could stop myself, I said, "I lost my job." The words dropped like weights. Ethan turned from the sink, toothbrush still in his mouth, eyes wide. Mom froze, then said, "Oh, sweetheart." I hated that word in that moment. I didn't feel like a sweetheart. I felt like a failure. But Ethan stepped in. "We'll figure something out." His voice was calm, solid, and for a second, I believed him. The next few days were rough. I applied to every writing gig I could find. Blog work, script editing, even a ghostwriting job, for someone's online dating profile service. Nothing landed. And with every, we'll keep your resume on file, I sank a little deeper. I started staying in bed longer, stopped eating breakfast, skipped dinner once or twice just because I couldn't bring myself to sit at the table and smile like everything was fine. Mom tried to help. She started leaving job listings next to my coffee mug. Dad handed me a stack of old business cards from random people he met at Home Depot, saying, maybe someone need a writer? And Ethan didn't push. But one night, he came into my room and said, I've got a plan. I sat up. What kind of plan? He held up his phone. Okay, hear me out. You're going to write something. Not for money. Not for clients. For you, I'm going to post it. You'll get eyes on your stuff. Maybe someone will reach out. Maybe not. But you'll remember you're still a writer. I stared at him. You think someone's just going to see it and magically offer me work? He shrugged. Stranger things have happened. Mom posted a Facebook status, and now half the neighborhood knows we're gay and still brings us lasagna. I cracked a smile. Fine, I said. One piece. The next day I wrote, not about myself, not about my family, not even about Ethan. I wrote a short story fiction about a boy who finds a message in a bottle floating in a lake and how that message changes the way he sees the world. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Ethan posted it to a blog he'd secretly created for me called Dan Writes Things. Within 2 days, it had over 1,000 views. By the end of the week, it had 5,000. And then someone sent an email through the contact form, a producer from a small podcast who wanted to adapt the story into an audio drama. I couldn't believe it. I sat on the couch reading the email over and over. Ethan walked in, chewing granola bar, and I just stared at him. What? He said, mouth full. I held up my phone. His eyes widened. Shut up. No, you shut up. You're lying. Read it. He did. Twice. Then screamed so loud Mom thought we'd broken a window. That little podcast gig didn't pay much. But it led to another, and another. And soon, I had enough freelance work coming in that I wasn't just surviving. I was building again. And I owed it all to Ethan. The kid I used to protect had saved me. One night, a month later, we were sitting on the porch. It had rained earlier, and the air smelled like damp earth and relief. I never thanked you, I said. For what? For reminding me who I am. He shrugged. You've always been a writer. You just forgot for a second. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the kid who used to cry when he lost board games, who once asked if trees could feel lonely. And now he was standing taller, speaking softer, but stronger. You're kind of amazing, you know that? He blushed. Shut up. I mean it. He smiled. Don't make me cry. That same night, I found a note taped to my door. It was from Dad. Read your lake story. It was good. Real good. I don't say that stuff much, but I'm proud of you, Dad. That was the first time in 23 years he'd ever written those words. And I kept that note folded in my wallet for weeks. Still have it, actually. See, the thing is, family isn't just about who raises you. It's about who holds you when things fall apart. And sometimes the ones you thought you had to carry, they're the ones who carry you. When people say, things are finally settling down, what they really mean is, we've gotten comfortable just in time to be shaken again. And in our case, that shaking came in a literal envelope. No fanfare, no warning, just a plain white letter addressed to Ethan. Mail from Ohio, from our grandfather. Now, a little context. We hadn't seen Grandpa Ed in almost 6 years. He was Dad's dad, a gruff, retired military man who drank black coffee by the gallon and thought feelings were best left in the damn toolbox. He wasn't cruel, just rigid, set in his ways. He'd only visited once since we were kids, and I don't think he'd ever spoken more than 20 words to Ethan in one sitting. So when the letter came, with his handwriting, it felt like a ticking clock. Ethan held it like it might explode. I don't know if I want to open this, he said. You don't have to. I do, but I don't want to. Want me to read it first? He shook his head. No, I need to see. He opened it slowly. I watched from the doorway, trying not to hover. His eyes scanned the page, lips pressed tight. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he exhaled sharp, short, and handed me the paper. I took it and read. Ethan, your mother posted something about you and your brother. I don't do the whole online thing, but word gets around. I won't pretend to understand it. I was raised in a different world, but I've been thinking a lot lately about regrets, about time, about what kind of man I want to be, even in my last years. You're my grandson. That's what matters. If you'll have me, I'd like to visit and talk and listen. No judgments, just family. Ed, I looked up at Ethan. His eyes were shiny, but he wasn't crying. Yet, what do you think? I asked softly. I don't know. I didn't expect this. Do you want him to come? He hesitated, then nodded. I think I do. Mom was surprised when we told her. I didn't even know he knew how to write letters, she said, half joking. Dad was unreadable. He reached out? He asked, eyebrow raised. Ethan nodded. Dad just grunted. But that night, I heard him on the phone, voice low, serious. He didn't say much, but I caught enough. You be respectful. You listen more than you speak. And don't you dare come here just to make a point. He never confirmed who he was talking to, but we knew. Grandpa arrived 3 days later. Drove himself. Old truck, dented fender. Smelled like dust and leather. He stood on the porch like he was reporting for duty. Ethan opened the door. Neither of them moved for a second. Then Grandpa said, "You're taller than I remember." Ethan laughed, just a breath. "You look the same." They shook hands. Not a hug, but it was something. The visit was tense at first. Grandpa stayed 2 nights in the guest room, sat stiffly during meals, watched the news too loud. But he asked questions, tentatively, like someone testing the water before diving in. What do you like about this boy of yours? What was it like telling your folks? You always know? Ethan answered each one, slow, thoughtful, honest. And Grandpa listened, didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just listened. On the last night, the 2 of them sat on the porch swing. I watched from inside, pretending not to. Grandpa handed Ethan something, small, square. Later, Ethan showed it to me. It was an old photo, black and white, of Grandpa and another man, both in army uniforms, sitting close together on a bench. No labels, no caption. But Ethan looked at me and said, "Do you think?" "I don't know," I said, "but maybe." After he left, Ethan was quiet for a while. He kept that photo in a drawer. Didn't say much about it, but I could tell something had settled in him. Some ache eased. That peace didn't last long, because just as things were smoothing out, Ethan hit a wall of his own. It started with texts. One from Zane. "Hey, my mom's being weird about me coming over. Might be best if I don't for a bit." Then another, "She found a message you sent. Didn't go well." And finally, "I'm sorry. I can't talk for a while. Not your fault." Ethan spiraled. Hard. He didn't say much at first, but I could hear in the way he shut his door, the way he declined dinners, the way his music changed, soft, sad, piano-heavy playlist replacing his usual indie rock. One night, I knocked gently. He didn't answer, so I opened the door. He was lying on the floor, headphones on, eyes closed. When he saw me, he didn't move. "I didn't think it would hurt like this," he whispered. I sat down next to him. He didn't cry, just stared at the ceiling. He didn't even fight her, he said, just disappeared. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't, because I remembered what that kind of fear felt like. Over the next week, I did what he'd done for me. I brought pie, terrible jokes, awkward documentaries about frogs. And slowly, inch by inch, he came back. One morning, we were both in the kitchen, eating cereal in silence, when he said, "You know what the worst part is?" "What?" "I finally let someone see me, and then they looked away." I put down my spoon. "Then let the next one see all of you. And if they can't handle it, let them be the ones who look away." He looked up, softly smiled. Therapy's really paying off, huh? I laughed. Shut up. Later that day, he went into his room, wrote something, came out, and handed it to me. It was a poem, rough, a little cheesy, but full of heart. I read it twice, then hugged him. You should share this. He shook his head. Not yet. And that was okay, because the words were out, and that was a start. Something had changed in Ethan, not in a dramatic, movie montage kind of way, but subtly, quietly, like the first signs of spring after a long, frozen winter. He wasn't fully back to himself yet, still carried silence around his shoulders like a second jacket, still avoided certain songs, certain questions, certain memories. But the way he started standing again, I could feel it. The way he looked people in the eye, the way he started writing, the way he began choosing his pace. Then something strange happened. It started with an email I got from the same podcast that adapted my short story. They were putting together a live storytelling night, a showcase, writers, speakers, poets, and they wanted me to read. I almost said no. I hated stages, hated spotlights. My voice cracked when I even read in class. But then I thought of Ethan, of his quiet bravery, of how he let the world see him, even when it shattered a little. I told them yes. And then I told Ethan. He lit up. That's huge. I'm nervous, I admitted. He smirked. Welcome to my world. As I prepared, I noticed Ethan spending more time in front of his notebook. He'd write, cross things out, write again, then stop, then start again. Finally, one night, he walked into my room with a folded paper in his hand. Will you read this? I took it, unfolded it. It was a poem, but different, sharper, deeper, real, a mix of pain and hope and defiance. It ended with the line, I am still here, still rising, still mine. When I looked up, he wasn't smiling. He was bracing, waiting. Well, he asked. I cleared my throat. You should read this. Out loud. For people. No way. Why not? Because it's me. Exactly. The night of the showcase came fast. It was in this tiny theater downtown. String lights, foldable chairs, old wooden stage that creaked when you breathed too hard. There were 15 readers. I was number 11. Ethan came with me, sat in the front row, chewed his nails like he was the one performing. When it was my turn, I walked up with shaking hands. The light was hot on my face. But the moment I looked out and saw him there, watching me, nodding silently, the words came easier. I read a new story, one I hadn't shown anyone, about two brothers, about love that doesn't always roar, but stands, waits, holds you steady when the ground shifts. People clapped. I heard one woman sniffle. Ethan was on his feet before I even stepped off stage. You crushed it, he said, hugging me hard. Then out of nowhere, he turned to stage organizer and said, Can I read something too? The woman blinked. You're not on the list. It's just a short piece. A poem. 2 minutes, tops. She looked at me. I nodded. He's worth it. They let him go up last. Unplanned, unscheduled. But what happened next? I'll never forget. Ethan stood in front of that crowd, holding a crumpled page. He took a shaky breath. And then he read, not just the words, but himself. He poured every quiet ache and every shattered hope into that microphone. And when he finished with, I am still here, still rising, still mine, there was silence, thick, powerful, and then applause, thunderous, echoing, unapologetic. Afterward, people came up to him. One man said, You said everything I've never had the courage to say. A girl with purple hair said, That last line? That line saved me. And Ethan? He didn't hide, didn't deflect, just smiled, small but proud. On the ride home, he looked out the window and whispered, I think I needed that. I didn't say anything, just reached over and squeezed his hand. The next day, the organizer emailed both of us. She wanted to feature our pieces on the podcast's main season. National release. Real listeners. Real exposure. I forwarded it to Ethan. He replied with 2 words. Holy SH*T. That's when it really hit me. This moment, this new chapter, wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building. And Ethan? He wasn't in the background anymore. He was stepping into the light and realizing he belonged there. Mom was over the moon when she heard. She made a cake with the words still rising, piped on top in pink frosting. Dad? He took the day off work the day the podcast released. Listened to both episodes twice. Didn't say much afterward, except, you boys did good. But later that night, we found his Facebook account. Newly made. Single post. Proud of my sons. That's all. That's when Ethan cried again. Not from pain this time, but from release. From fullness. We had dinner together that night. All 4 of us. No distractions. Just real conversation, laughter, clinking forks. And when Ethan said, I think I want to publish more, no one flinched. No one asked why. We just asked what kind. Because now, the house we lived in wasn't just filled with honesty. It was built on it, brick by brick. Every family has that one person. You know the one. The family member who vanished after a disagreement. Whispered about during holidays, but never directly mentioned. For us, that person was Uncle Ray, Dad's younger brother. Once the cool uncle, the one who brought us comic books and taught us how to roast marshmallows without burning them. But then one Christmas, 6 years ago, he got into a shouting match with Dad over something political. Something small, stupid, that escalated into something ugly. He left before dessert and never came back. Until now. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind where the clouds never fully open up. They just linger like they're sulking. Mom was folding laundry. Dad was in the garage. Ethan and I were on the couch watching an old sitcom rerun. Then the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there he was. Same leather jacket, a little grayer at the temples, holding a small umbrella and a plastic bag. Uncle Ray. I said. He gave a half smile. Hey, kid. Ethan froze when he walked in. Mom stood up, hands still full of socks. Even Dad, usually unreadable, came in from the garage and just stared. Uncle Ray looked around. I won't stay long, he said. I was just driving through. Thought I'd stop by, see if I could say hi. No one spoke for a second. Then Mom, the undisputed queen of emotional diplomacy, gestured to the kitchen. Well, come sit. We got coffee. He sat at the kitchen table like a guest in his own history. Took the coffee, sipped, and said nothing for a long time. Then finally, I saw the podcast. We all froze. What? Ethan asked. The one you 2 did. The readings. The story. The poem. I listened. He cleared his throat. Twice. It was Ethan who broke the silence. Why? Ray laughed. A sad, soft sound. Because I missed you. All of you. And because I'm tired of pretending like love has limits. He looked directly at Ethan. You were brave. I wasn't. Dad shifted in his seat. Tense. Uncomfortable. You didn't even call, he muttered. I know. You let 6 years go by. I know that too. They locked eyes. Not with rage, but with ache. Then Dad said something I never expected. I missed you, Ray. That's when it started. The slow, cautious rebuilding. Like picking up shards of glass with bare hands. But they were trying. Uncle Ray stayed for dinner. It wasn't like old times. Not quite. But the laughter came back. Slowly. He asked Ethan about writing. Told me I looked taller. I wasn't. Apologized to Mom for missing her birthday 3 years ago. And when he hugged Ethan goodbye, he said, You're everything I hoped this family would become. Later that night, Ethan came into my room. He didn't say anything at first. Just sat at the edge of my bed, arms crossed, eyes a little glassy. That was weird, he finally said. Yeah, but good. Yeah. Then he asked, Do you think people really change? I thought about that for a moment. Maybe not overnight, I said, but moment by moment? Yeah, I think they can. And that next moment came faster than either of us expected. The podcast episodes went semi-viral. Not viral, but enough. Enough for emails to flood in from strangers, teachers, teens, parents. One girl wrote, "My mom listened to your poem and came into my room crying. She said she was sorry. For the first time in 2 years, we ate dinner together." A middle-aged man wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to tell my wife I'm bisexual. She didn't leave. We're in therapy now." Another person said, "I shared your podcast with my church group. They're talking now, really talking." We printed those messages out, hung them on a corkboard in the hallway, not out of pride, but reminder that truth ripples, that honesty multiplies, that one moment, one sentence can unstick years of silence. A few days later, Ethan came into the living room holding his phone. He looked stunned. "What?" I asked. He handed me the screen. It was a message request from Zane. "I've been listening to your words. To you. I'm sorry I disappeared. I shouldn't have. I want to talk. If you'll let me." Ethan stared at the floor. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now." "I want to." "Then say what you need, not what you think he wants." He looked up, and in that moment, I saw something different. Not the boy who cried on the bathroom floor over a breakup, but the young man who read his poem to a room full of strangers and let them see him. Ethan took the phone, typed a reply. He didn't tell me what he wrote, but he smiled afterward, just slightly, and that was enough. The next day, Uncle Ray texted Dad a photo of a rainbow flag hanging from his porch. Dad didn't say anything out loud, but I saw him save the photo. And later that night, he said, "We're all learning, one moment at a time." The thing about healing is, it's never a straight line. It twists, it hesitates, and sometimes it hurts even more when something good comes back into your life, because you're afraid it'll disappear again. That's how it was when Zane showed up, not unannounced this time. He texted Ethan first, then called, and after 3 days of pacing and 3 drafts of should I even texts, Ethan said yes. He showed up on a Sunday afternoon. No leather jacket this time. Just a plain navy hoodie, worn jeans, and that same slightly too confident posture that made him seem untouchable. Even when he clearly wasn't. Ethan answered the door. They looked at each other for a long second. Then Zane said softly, "You look taller." Ethan laughed, breathy, unsure. "You already used that line." Zane smiled. "Still works." They sat on the back porch. I stayed inside, close enough to hear murmurings, but far enough to give them space. And space is exactly what they needed. For nearly 30 minutes, they just talked. No yelling, no blame, just real, careful conversation. Later, Ethan told me the basics. Zane's mom had found their messages. She'd freaked out, said things no kid should have to hear from a parent. So Zane did what he was taught to do. Retreat. Shut down. Comply. But something shifted after he heard Ethan's poem. "I couldn't pretend anymore," he had said. "Pretending started to feel like erasing you, and I couldn't live with that." I don't know if they're back together. They didn't use labels. But Zane came over again the next weekend. And the next, he even brought Ethan a book, poetry of all things. And when Dad saw them sitting on the porch swing together, he didn't flinch. He simply offered them lemonade and said, "Stay where you are. I'll bring it out." But just when things started to feel normal again, or whatever our new normal was, life reminded us it still had more surprises in store. It came in a small, crinkled envelope. No return address. Just Grandpa Ed's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letter this time. Just a copy of an old black and white photo. The same one he'd given Ethan months ago. But now, on the back, a note was scrawled in faded blue ink. His name was Lewis. My best friend. Maybe more. We never spoke about it. But I knew, and I've never stopped wondering what might have happened if we'd had your courage. Ethan stared at the photo for what felt like a full minute. then whispered, "I knew it." We told Dad. He read the note, didn't say anything for a long time, then nodded, and in a voice that almost cracked, said, "I wish he'd told me." Mom said, "Maybe this was him telling you." That night, we all sat in the living room. Ethan placed a photo on the mantle, right next to one of our whole family. No one objected, not even Dad. In fact, he said, he deserves to be part of this. A few days later, Ethan faced something even harder, something raw, public, and unfair. It happened at school. Ethan had submitted a short piece for the school literary magazine, a reworked version of his poem. He'd asked to read it aloud at the school's open mic night. The student advisor had approved it, but hours before the event, someone from the district called and said the poem was too sensitive for a school audience, too political, too personal. They asked if he could read something neutral. He came home furious, crushed. "I am neutral," he snapped. "This is my life. How is that controversial?" Mom wanted to storm the school board meeting. Dad actually said, "I'll back you up." But Ethan surprised us. He said, "No, I'll handle it." So that night he stood up in front of a full auditorium. Students, parents, teachers. And he didn't read the poem. He spoke, off script, honest. He talked about being silenced, about how asking someone to water down their truth is the same as asking them to disappear. He ended with, "If you're uncomfortable hearing it, imagine what it's like living it every day." And he walked off the stage to silence, then a few claps, then everyone, a standing ovation. The next morning, the school released a statement. They apologized. They shared the full poem on their website. And Ethan? He got an email from the state's Youth Arts Foundation. They wanted to feature him, interview him, publish his work. He stared at the screen for a long time, then looked at me and said, "What is even happening?" I laughed. "You're being seen." That weekend, Zane took him out for milkshakes to celebrate. When they came back, Ethan was flushed and smiling. I didn't ask what happened, but he handed me a napkin with a doodle Zane had drawn. 2 boys sitting under a tree, one reading aloud while the other listened with stars in his eyes. I pinned it beside the podcast fan mail. It just felt right. Every story has a turning point. Some come with fanfare. Some arrive as quietly as an old photo in the mail. But this was Ethan's moment. Not just of survival, but of power, of choosing not to shrink, and watching the world widen around him instead. There's something cruel about how life delivers its hardest moments, not with warning, but in the middle of joy. Ethan had just been invited to speak at a youth writers conference. Zane had asked if he wanted to officially start calling a relationship. Ethan had blushed, nodded, and said, "Only if you're sure." And Mom had ordered a custom frame for Grandpa Ed's photo, the one with Lewis, to hang permanently beside the fireplace. Everything finally felt like it was finding its place, until Dad collapsed in the garage. I wasn't home when it happened. Ethan was. He'd gone out to grab a snack when he heard a thud, sharp, heavy. He called Mom first, then 911. By the time I got to hospital, Ethan was sitting in a stiff plastic chair, jeans smudged with something that looked like grease, hands trembling around a paper cup of cold coffee. He didn't look up when I sat beside him. He just whispered. He wasn't breathing when I found him. My throat closed up. It wasn't a heart attack. Not quite. Doctors called it a cardiac event, brought on by a combination of stress and high blood pressure. They stabilized him, but he'd need to stay for a few days. Maybe more. Mom looked like she'd aged 5 years in one night. She didn't cry. She just kept asking the doctors the same questions again and again. Like if she said the right combination of words, they'd give her a better answer. Ethan blamed himself. I should have noticed he was tired more often. I should have said something. "Ethan, no." I said firmly. "You saved his life. You found him. You called." But he shook his head. Still, I didn't see it coming. Neither did any of us. In the hospital room, Dad was quiet, more than usual. He had an oxygen tube in his nose and IVs in his arm, and he looked smaller, not just physically, but dimmed. When he opened his eyes and saw Ethan, he didn't speak. He just reached out, weakly. Ethan took his hand. They stayed like that for a long time. No words, just that grip, frail but firm. Later, when it was just the two of us in the waiting room, Ethan asked, "Do you think he's scared?" I nodded. "I think he's terrified." Ethan looked at his shoes. "Good." Then blinked. "That sounds awful. But part of me is glad, because maybe now he understands what fear feels like, what helplessness does." "I think he always understood," I said. "He just didn't know how to admit it." The next day, Uncle Ray showed up. He brought donuts and a lot of nervous energy. "I never thought I'd see my big brother in a hospital bed," he said quietly. "None of us did," Mom replied. But Ray stepped up. He handled the insurance calls, talked to the nurse about diet restrictions, took Mom home so she could shower and sleep. And when she was gone, he sat beside Dad and whispered, "You're not invincible. Never were. But you've always been ours. So don't you dare check out now." Something shifted between them in that room. Something softened. I saw Dad squeeze Ray's hand. Just once. And that was more than they'd said to each other in years. On the third day, Dad asked for Ethan. He didn't ask for food. Didn't ask for his phone. Just Ethan. When Ethan walked in, Dad gestured for him to sit. Then said, "I read your poem." Again. Ethan smiled faintly. "That the one that nearly got me suspended?" Dad shook his head. "No, the one that cracked me open." Pause. "You said you're still here, still rising, still yours." He looked at Ethan with eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. "Until now. I want you to know, I see you now, not just because of what you said, but because of who you are when no one's looking." Ethan didn't speak for a full minute. Then he just whispered, "Thank you." Dad came home a few days later, paler, slower, but home. Mom hovered, obviously. Ethan and I took turns checking on him every hour like overcautious parents. And every time I passed him, he'd ask me one of two things. "Did you eat?" Or, "Is Ethan writing something today?" That Saturday, we all sat on the back deck. Sun warm. Lemonade sweating in tall glasses. Birds chirping like they were trying too hard to be part of the piece. Uncle Ray grilled. Zane showed up with a tray of brownies he'd tried, and mostly failed, to bake. Even Grandpa had called to check in. Ethan put him on speakerphone, and everyone pretended not to tear up when he said, "Tell your dad I'm proud of him." Ethan leaned against the railing next to me and said, "Do you think this lasts?" This us. The peace. The honesty. I didn't have a perfect answer, but I said, "I think the people who fight for it and keep showing up even when it's hard, yeah, they get to keep it." Ethan nodded. Then he turned to Zane, who was laughing with Mom about his cement brownies, and said quietly, "I think I want to ask him to go with me to the writers' conference." I smiled. He'd say yes. He blushed. "I hope so." That night, I found Ethan in the living room alone, looking at the fireplace, at the photo of Grandpa Ed and Louis, and at our family photo, newer now, with all of us smiling on the porch swing. He whispered, mostly to himself, "All those years we thought we had to hide parts of ourselves just to be loved." He looked at me. Turns out the love was waiting. It just needed a door. Ethan's name was printed on a banner, not handwritten, not scribbled on a whiteboard, but printed in bold navy lettering against a clean white background. "Keynote Youth Speaker, Ethan Rhodes." We stood under it, blinking in disbelief. "Is that you?" I teased. He bumped my shoulder. "Shut up." But I saw the little smile he was trying to hide. The Youth Writers Conference was a 2-day event. Hundreds of students, mentors, published authors, activists, workshops on everything from spoken word to publishing contracts. And at the end, the keynote reading. Ethan had been invited to close the conference with a personal piece. He'd said yes, and then spent 4 weeks panicking about it. The night before the trip, Zane helped him rehearse in the backyard under string lights. I watched from the upstairs window as Ethan paced barefoot in the grass, paper in hand, Zane sitting on the steps, patient, smiling, nodding like every line deserved an encore. And when Ethan finished, I heard Zane say, "That's not just a poem. That's your heartbeat. Let them feel it." Mom packed an entire suitcase of just-in-case meds and 2 kinds of granola bars. Dad gave Ethan a firm hug and a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this back when you read your first one," he said. "Never showed you, but I want you to have it now." Ethan didn't open it right away, just held it like it was something fragile. We got to the conference early. Ethan was nervous, fidgety. He kept asking things like, "Is this shirt okay? What if I forget the lines? Do I sound like a fraud?" I finally stopped him and said, "You're not here to perform. You're here to be seen. And that's something you've mastered." The auditorium filled up fast. People from all over. I spotted 2 students from our town. A girl wearing a rainbow flag pin. A boy holding a copy of the podcast transcript, underlined in yellow. Ethan noticed them too and went pale. "I think I'm going to pass out." "You're not." "Pretty sure I am." But when his name was called, he stood, he walked, and he stepped into the light like it belonged to him. He didn't read a poem. He told a story. About fear, about silence, about choosing to unlearn shame, one breath at a time. About his brother. About Zane. About the grandfather he barely knew, who might have once loved a man named Lewis, but was too afraid to say it out loud. And then he paused, looked at the crowd, and said, "I'm not here because I figured it all out. I'm here because I stopped pretending I had to. And if even one of you is sitting in this room thinking you're too broken, too different, too much for the world to hold, I want you to know you're not too much. You're just beginning." There was no silence this time, just tears, applause, a standing ovation that lasted almost a minute. And from the side of the stage, I saw him exhale, not just from his lungs, but from his soul. Later that evening, we sat under the conference center's outdoor lights. Ethan had kicked off his shoes. Zane was leaning against his shoulder. I handed him a soda. He clinked it against mine like we were toasting something. "I feel like I'm finally living in my skin," he said. I nodded. "It looks good on you." Then he pulled out the folded paper Dad had given him, unfolded it, started reading. It was a letter in Dad's handwriting. "Ethan, I was raised by a man who taught me discipline, pride, toughness, but I never learned how to say the things that matter until I watched you say them to the world. Your courage isn't just beautiful, it's contagious. Because of you, I'm learning how to be a better father, a better man. No matter what happens next, I'm with you, proud of you forever. Dad." Ethan wiped his eyes. Zane didn't say anything, just wrapped an arm around him and held him tight. When we returned home, the house felt different, not in decor, not in furniture, but in air. The silence was softer. The rooms carried stories now. You could feel in the walls the echo of words that were finally spoken. Uncle Ray visited more often. Grandpa Ed sent a second photo. This time, just a picture of a handwritten note that read, "Tell your truth, even if your voice shakes." I wish I had. Mom finally convinced Dad to start walking each morning, and sometimes Ethan joined. They didn't always talk, but they didn't need to. They were walking forward, together. One afternoon, I found Ethan sitting at the desk in our shared office space. He was writing again, not nervously, not fearfully, just writing. I asked what it was. He smiled. "It's a novel. About—" He shrugged. "A boy who thought he had to shrink to be loved, until he realized he could expand instead." I laughed. "Sounds familiar." He winked. "Maybe a little." A few weeks later, we got a package from the podcast producers. Inside were 2 printed books. Our stories, side by side. Published. Real. Tangible. Ethan flipped through the pages, then said, "Can I read the last part of yours again?" I nodded. He turned to the end. Read aloud. He didn't change in one moment. But one moment was where it began. The moment he realized family doesn't mean agreement. It means showing up and staying. Ethan closed the book, then looked at me, eyes glossy, but smiling. "You think we'll keep changing?" I smiled back. We already have.